everybody, welcome back to another episode of Dirty Dusty Records. I'm Adam, aka Guzzo Funk, here to show you a couple more records in another genre. Today I'm going to be tackling the genre of spiritual jazz. Now I don't even know if spiritual jazz has like a clear definition, but to me spiritual jazz is music that happened between the 60s and the mid 80s. It can still happen today, I suppose, but it kind of, it's not quite bop, it's not quite modal. Sometimes it has vocals. It doesn't quite get to free jazz, but it has free jazz elements in it. There are certain labels that seem to really kind of revel in it, and it's a genre that I dig for the sake that most songs are long, not too noodly, make you think or make you drift off. They just bring a really nice mood. I collected some of these records before, but honestly I collected most of them for the samples, and then after a while I started getting more into like the actual sound on these records and started hunting down records from labels like Tribe in Detroit, Strata East in New York, Strata in Detroit, Nimbus here in LA, and a few other different labels. And I want to show you a few of those today, so I'm going to go ahead and begin. The first one I'm going to show you is by saxophonist / flautist Harold Vick. This is on the Strata East label. It's called Don't Look Back. Harold Vick, he put out a multitude of albums on RCA in the 60s, and this one came out in 1974. This one had a special meaning to me because Harold Vick had another album released in 1974 that was recorded in 67, and it was something that I picked up early on and really just kind of dug it. There was a song on it called HNIC that I was like, whoa. And I found out about the Strata album and made some pretty hefty trades to end up getting this, but I was pretty glad I have it. This album here came out on the Detroit label Tribe. It is by trombonist Phil Randall. It's called The Time Is Now. It is one of two albums he released on that label, this one being a little more spiritual than his other one, Vibes from the Tribe, which is a little bit more funky. This album features a lot of the players that were on the Tribe label, like Marcus Belgrave. It is just a straight slice of 1974 Detroit jazz sound. It's honestly something I could try to describe, but I'd rather have people just listen to it. Phil Randall nowadays has settled in the LA area. He actually does shows around Los Angeles. I was lucky enough to go see a show of his on his 80th birthday. If you ever have a chance to see Phil Randall, especially considering his age, I would highly recommend seeing him. He is this gawky, tall trombonist, and then him being 80 years old, he was dancing at the show. He was putting on a whole thing. This next album is by a lady named Adele Sebastian on a Los Angeles label called Nimbus West. Adele Sebastian had a very sad story. She was a flautist / vocalist. She released this one album in her early 20s, and shortly after this album came out, I believe, she passed on. So this is the one record of her musical talent that she's featured on. It is tremendously beautiful. It came out in 1981, and you would not be able to tell by the year anything about it. It's got beautiful tracks on it, including the title track, Desert Fairy Princess. She has a lot of the LA regulars playing with her, so I believe it's been reissued, so you can find a reissue out there. I believe it's also on Spotify, so check it out there. And on top of that, I'm going to leave a clip for you guys to listen to here. This record here is by a Las Vegas group called Spirit Free. It's called Spirit Free Plays Starship. It's a private press record. You can tell by its stock cover. Stock covers were basic covers that certain pressing companies had just as generic covers for their albums. So Spirit Free chose to use that cover and just kind of put their own font in the middle. It is a beautiful album featuring electric piano, which I am a sucker for. If I see electric piano or vibraphone on any album, it gives me a reason to give it a listen. I love any sort of twinkly sounds. This one is 5 strong tracks, all beautiful. This is one of those records that I call a laundry record, where I could just put it on, fold my laundry, and not have to worry about skipping any tracks. I could just listen through, let that electric piano vibe just kind of like roll out while I fold up all my underwear. It's great. This album here is by the great Lonnie Liston Smith. It is called Astral Traveling. Lonnie Liston Smith was a piano player. He played both acoustic and electric piano. He also had a penchant for wearing some of the most awesome fucking hats I've seen. There is an Instagram site called Spiritual Jazz Hats. I highly recommend it. There are 6 tracks on this album, and it comes out on the Flying Dutchman label, which was producer Bob Thiel's label. If you haven't checked out the Flying Dutchman label, I would. There's a lot of great things. Mostly jazz, but a couple soul things on that label. Gil Scott Heron put out some stuff on that label. If you have not checked any of Lonnie Liston Smith's albums out, he basically did no wrong in the 70s. If you see his name on an album and you see the 1970s as the decade that he played it in, just buy it. This album here is by Bobby Hutcherson. Now, Bobby Hutcherson is one of my favorite artists in any genre. He is a vibraphonist. This particular album is a little different from a lot of his other albums in the fact that it features vocals by Eugene McDaniels, who put out several soul albums starting in the early 60s and moved on to doing some really far out stuff in the early 70s that got the attention of people like Spiro Agnew, Richard Nixon's vice president. This particular album has a lot of vocals kind of fluttering over the music in a Greek chorus way, but it's far more in a soulful vein than anything that you could actually call a Greek chorus. It's one that I honestly don't see that much, despite the fact that it's on a major label like Blue Note. Blue Note probably being like the king to most people of jazz labels. You can find samples online, and you can also find a sample right after this. That's all the albums I'll be doing for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I love spiritual jazz. Hopefully I showed you guys a little bit about spiritual jazz. Hopefully you guys saw some stuff you already knew. Any thoughts that you have, please leave them in the comments. Please show this to all your friends that are into record collecting. I'd really appreciate it, and thank you so much.